Well, I want to thank you all for coming in today. You all know me, I'm Carmen in the Lake Street Chamber, but I think this is a great opportunity. AJ from the New Hampshire Insurance Department, for the New Hampshire Insurance Department, has reached out about hosting an event and really just helping with education from a business sense. And I know that we're sort of the first in several programs throughout the state, and we're happy to do that. I know there are two parts to this, so later on, a lot of the brokers will be here as well for different scenarios. So without further ado, because you all know about the chamber, so I don't have to promote it to you, I'm going to introduce, you're going first.
I'll introduce myself and Luann, and then we'll kind of jump into it. It's always nice having a smaller group of people, though, because a little bit more intimate, we can kind of tailor the questions. But my name is Keith Knight. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I have been there approximately 17 years, and my background coming to the insurance department is life insurance and annuities, and since joining the department, I've kind of branched out into any kind of insurance that we touch at the department.
Oh, thank you. My name is Luann King. I'm the supervisor for P&C Forms Compliance. I've been with the New Hampshire Insurance Department for a little over 6 years. And my team, we basically, in a nutshell, any form or endorsement that a consumer in New Hampshire has seen has gone through my unit as far as to make sure it's in compliance with all of our state laws and regulations. So we look at it on the front end.
Yeah. So that's probably a pretty good segue. We kind of transition to really what the insurance department does. And the mission of the department, I actually wrote this down, is to promote and protect the public good by ensuring the existence of safe and competitive insurance marketplace through the development and enforcement of insurance laws of the state of New Hampshire. And we're committed to doing so in an honest and efficient manner. Really what that boils down to is we are basically the insurance police for the state of New Hampshire. Our primary mission is consumer protection, and we do that in a multitude of ways. And there's probably, I'll say, 5 different ways that we protect consumers, that you could probably be further broken out into probably 3. But first and foremost, the insurance department is charged with ensuring that the companies that write insurance in the state of New Hampshire remain solvent or financially viable, so that when you do have claims, the company has the money to pay those claims. Number one responsibility of the department, and we do so in a couple sorts of ways. The Financial Regulation Division is broken down into 2 subunits. One of them is the Financial Analysis Unit. In that unit, on a quarterly basis, for all of the insurance companies that call New Hampshire home, we're in the domicile state, they're looking at quarterly financial reports. To include at year end, there's a much larger annual report to ensure that the solvency of the company, the assets, the liabilities, the reserves, again, are all present, so that when there is a claim, that the company has the money to pay claims. The second part of that unit is the Financial Examination Division, which acts as an audit team. And that team will travel sometimes to insurance companies. Sometimes they do the examinations or audits from their desks, but they're looking at policies, procedures, practice, all related to financial issues to ensure that the companies, again, remain solvent. Next, we have kind of the enforcement component of the insurance department, which exists of fraud, our fraud division, and our enforcement unit. The fraud division is actually, there's 3 examiners where they're going out, or as they receive complaints or cases, they're actually looking for violations of criminal law. And we'll talk a little bit more about criminal versus administrative law. But in the case of criminal law, think of those cases where there's usually theft involved as it relates to an insurance product. And the classic example is someone who is in an automobile accident. Perhaps this individual doesn't have insurance. So from the side of the road, they pick a company, USAA, they purchase auto insurance right there at the scene of the accident, and file a claim the following day and say, geez, I had a collision. That's fraud. They didn't have insurance, and they're trying to take advantage of the system. Another common fraud complaint would be an individual who says, I lost my diamond ring, and files an insurance claim to receive the insurance money, and yet 2 days later you see the same diamond ring on Facebook from an event that's dated. criminal activity, stealing from the insurance companies. That's what our fraud division looks at. Interestingly enough, last year in calendar year 2023, our fraud division received more than 400 referrals, conducted 35 formal investigations. There were 19 that were prosecuted, and that unit recovered more than $1.6 million for the residents of New Hampshire. Kind of what I always think of as a sister unit to the fraud division is our enforcement team. And the enforcement team is, as one of our former enforcement attorneys used to say, those of us in the insurance department who find problems get to make snowballs, and the enforcement team gets to throw them at the people, which is they're the ones who are actually levying fines. And last year, our enforcement division had 250 cases, 12 enforcement actions, resulting in just over $250,000 of recovery. So that's kind of those two kind of peripheral units. Really the bread and butter of what the insurance department does at a consumer level resides in the consumer services division. That's a division which consists of 7 individuals. There's a director, a manager, 4 investigators, and 1 person who kind of keeps all the work flowing through the system. And the consumer services unit is one of 3 legs, what I like to call the consumer protection stool. So as Luann had mentioned earlier, her team, which is the compliance unit, looks on the front end prior to a policy being issued, any applications, any policy language, all of those forms, if you will, need to be reviewed and approved by someone at the insurance department to make sure that they comply with all the laws and rules that we have relative to those forms. On the back end, so that's kind of a pre-issue process. The post-issue process is, once the policies are in place, we have a market conduct team. And the market conduct team, similar to the financial regulation division, actually conducts audits of an insurance company's practices, and they're looking for patterns and practices of systemic behavior that could harm consumers. And it might be a billing issue. It might be that the company has a policy and procedure to ensure claims are paid a certain way, but they're not doing that. It could be, and actually it's not uncommon for us to receive complaints in the consumer division where it said, hey, listen, my policy was terminated. I don't understand why. And we go contact the company, and perhaps there is a systems glitch. So our market conduct team is looking at patterns and practices, violations of policies and procedures that would impact a broad section of their consumers. The consumer division, which was what I was talking about before, kind of sits in the middle. This is the ears and eyes of the insurance department. So while you have a policy, it could be a homeowner's policy, it could be auto insurance, really anything business insurance if you're a small business owner, health insurance, anything that relates to you as an insurance consumer, the division is prepared to help. The division has a 3-fold mission, which is to educate, navigate, and investigate. And really what that means is the education side of the house is we being a state agency, we're unbiased, we don't work for an insurance company, and we can answer any questions that you have about an annuity contract, a health insurance policy, a homeowner's policy, any questions that you have about insurance, we have a team that can answer those questions. And those usually come in through phone calls or emails. The navigate function is kind of take some of those education questions and expand upon them. It's usually helping someone navigate the complexities of an insurance claim or buying insurance. I mean, it can be daunting if you have an insurance accident and you're going through your own insurance company, or maybe you were hit by someone else and you're going through their insurance company. It can become very confusing as to, if there's a deductible, will you get your deductible back? Should you go through the other person's insurance or your own insurance? And we have a staff that can help you navigate those types of questions. Another common one is the purchase of health insurance. Again, it can be very daunting if you're buying in the individual market. What companies are good, which companies are bad. What's an appropriate deductible? We can help you navigate those types of questions. And then lastly, the investigative function in the consumer division is you as a consumer have a formal written grievance about one of our licensees, which are typically insurance companies or insurance agents. we can investigate a complaint by, we typically contact the licensee. If you've ever dealt with a situation where the company's not responding to your questions, they have to respond to us within 10 business days, and we're going to investigate any complaints that you have. We had mentioned automobile claims earlier. It's been pretty frequent these days for us to be contacted by someone who's been in an accident, who's had a total loss. The company likes to offer, if your car, you owe $10,000 in your car, company's offering you $8,000, and you don't understand why. We can investigate that. We can contact the company and find out why the company is offering $8,000 versus $10,000, and there may be violations of our laws and rules on how they calculate that differential. Relative to annuity contracts, we're routinely being contacted by consumers who said, hey, I purchased this annuity contract 10 years ago, and it's not what I signed up for. I thought I was buying a fixed annuity, and I have a variable product, and there's things of that nature. We can contact the insurance company, find out what happened, and hopefully unravel problems or otherwise resolve those. Last year, the consumer division recovered more than $6.1 million for consumers, and this is money that consumers would not have recovered without our assistance. That would range anywhere from, I think on a low end, we had a $3 recovery, and on a high end, we had about $500,000. And again, we're a free service to all residents of New Hampshire. We take great pride in being able to help. Even if you find yourself in a situation of perhaps needing an attorney, we can do a lot of that legwork up front that you could provide to an attorney that would save money just in legal costs. So that's kind of a broad overview of the department's consumer protection services. And now we can certainly ask some questions, but I know there's a few more parts of the agenda, but being a small group, we're happy to take any questions that you have along the way.
Is the fraud division, is the sole purpose, obviously, investigating fraud, is that taking premiums above?
I think I wouldn't say that's their primary mission, but that is a function of what they're doing, is they're just trying to make sure, it's theft. In this case, it's a criminal violation, but that is one of the direct byproducts of their involvement, is to keep costs down, which do keep premiums lower.
Yeah, being criminal, though, I would think the least would do it. That's,
So our fraud division works very closely with local police departments as well as our state investigators. Sometimes it's jurisdictional. Sometimes it is more a matter of expertise. Two of our three fraud investigators are former police officers. So it's just a different type of investigation. It's an interesting question that you ask, why wouldn't it be done just by the local individuals? And I would say, without knowing the exact answer, probably going to break along the lines of expertise in the areas of insurance.
that's
Not to mention we're licensees, and we can get information from insurance companies easier.
So how long do those things take, like an auto, like you take, what do you use, like on average, be kind of like a year?
No, it varies by product, as a matter of fact. We try to complete investigations on our property and casualty lines, homeowners, and auto insurance, usually within 30 days. The life insurance and annuity cases usually take closer to 60 days, just because, to be honest with you, most complaints that we receive involving automobile insurance or homeowners insurance or business insurance are about claims that just happened. Rather, on the life insurance side, we don't have too many complaints about claims. You're either dead or you're not. But on annuity cases, it's usually about, hey, I was sold this 10 years ago, and that's not what I purchased. There's a much more in-depth investigation of kind of trying to unring a bell and say, what actually was said 10 years ago? What do the documents say versus personal representations? I would say those typically take 60 days, sometimes longer. Fraud investigations, they have a life of their own, but normal routine complaints, we strive for 30 to 60 days. It's a good question. I wish we could do it quicker, but part of the process is the licensees have 10 business days to respond to us. So it's very rare that we're going to have something completed in less than 2 weeks. All right, good question. So, if you think of any others, please feel free to ask us. Looks like up next we were going to talk about some workers' compensation. Did I miss something?
Nope. I'm gonna talk about the property and casualty checklist. So not knowing how much information everybody here is aware for the commercial insurance, I'm gonna just speak a little bit. If you have a big business, a small business, doesn't matter what size, you really need to cover your bases and make sure you're protected adequately for your insurance needs. And every business needs one thing in common is the liability portion. You need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in harm's way from a liability standpoint. And that's where I'm going to say right off the bat, your best resource for getting the coverage that you need tailored to your specific needs would be your local trusted independent agent. Because if you sit down with your agent and you tell them everything that you do in your business, in your size, in your needs, they're going to be able to build a modular policy for you that's going to cover everything that you need without making you pay for coverages that would not ever apply to your specific business. But the common denominator, I think, throughout the business world, no matter the size, is the liability portion. That is key. So obviously the commercial general liability policy, as it says in the title, that's going to cover all of your liability needs. That's more for your larger businesses. And make sure that when you're speaking with your agent, that you're getting the limits that you need, because that's also very important. And feel free, and I should also plug this now, shop your insurance, ask your independent agent to shop all of the carriers that they're licensed to get quotes with, because price does matter. I wouldn't say that you should always go with the lowest. I mean, look at the reputation for the company, look at the policy itself. There's a lot of policies. Every company wants to make themselves stand out a little bit differently than the next. So they'll have their own set of endorsements or bells and whistles. You're going to get your basics, but then you might get some other coverages that another carrier may or may not offer. So just weigh everything out with your agent. Your agent is your best resource. And as Keith mentioned, the insurance department is always here. If you're working with your agent and something is just not seeming right, or you just have this other question, I mean, we're always here to help whenever we can. So in addition to your liability, you're going to have property, your assets coverages. And again, this is going to vary by what you do for business and how many assets you have. Do you manufacture? What do you have for physical assets? And your commercial property coverage is going to cover you for all of your named perils on your policy, your fires and your thefts and that type of thing. So property and liability, property and casualty, those are your two main focuses. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with BOPs, business owner policies. They're like the smaller business coverages. It's a comprehensive multi-peril policy all built into one. Again, your agent can help customize that a little bit for you. Cyber liability should not go unmentioned here. Cyber is huge right now. The breaches, everybody's experiencing breaches. I think we get a letter at home, once every month that says, oh, your bank information was incidentally sold last March. We're going to watch your credit for you for a year for free. That's a component of the cyber liability insurance that in this case, the bank purchased. They're going to, for you as a small business owner or a large business owner even, they're going to be able to assist you with the data breaches, including costs to alert the public and restoring your reputation. And then maybe that 12-month that they'll take over, just monitoring any radical changes, I would say, with the individual's credit. Business interruption, I can't stress this enough. This is huge. Depending on your business needs, it's very critical for some businesses. It's a make it or break it kind of insurance. If you don't have it, as Keith mentioned, if you don't have it and something happens, you can't just stand on the side of the road and make a phone call and get the coverage to be retroactive. It's important to have that in place beforehand. That's going to help you supplement your lost business income for a covered peril that has occurred. So again, make sure that the trigger is on your policy, is built into your policy. This is where getting the right coverage up front is key. Make sure that you tell your agent, I'm worried about this, and make sure that you have all of the coverages. Hand in hand with business interruption. It's not on the handout here, but it's the extra expenses. Talk to your agent about that. It's not a lot of money and it does a lot of good. So that goes hand in hand with the business interruption. I'll just speak briefly on workers' comp. I am not a workers' comp expert, nor do I pretend to be. However, we do have workers' comp experts at the insurance department. But briefly, almost all businesses in the state of New Hampshire, with limited exceptions, are required to have workers' compensation when they have an employee. And I think we all understand what the function of workers' compensation does. The coverage provides benefits to employees if they suffer an injury or illness related to the job. And again, we have two really strong experts at the insurance department that if you have any concerns, it's kind of interesting because the workers' compensation is, the statutes live in the Department of Labor's statutes, but the insurance department, we police to make sure that the insurance companies are following the Department of Labor statutes. Then that's not uncommon because we also use Department of Safety's statutes with regard to auto. We use 259, 264 all the time. Those statutes are owned by or created by the Department of Safety. The insurance department enforces those. And there are other standalone statutes too that we use that are not our statutes. The insurance department statutes live within the 400s. So I'm just saying that we have a broad base when it comes to enforcement. Like we make sure that all of the statutes are followed, regardless of if they're our statutes, Department of Safety's, Department of Labor's, and so on.
So if I can just jump in. So one important thing to keep in mind with workers' compensation insurance is it is required for most businesses in the state of New Hampshire. Cost of workers' compensation insurance is going to be dictated by the type of business that you're involved in. Certainly workers' compensation for, a smaller group of teachers is going to be less expensive than people who are doing roofing services. What we have seen, though, for the past 3 or 4 years is a steady decrease in workers' compensation rates, primarily because, as a general rule, we've become much safer. So it's a good pattern. We can't always speak about trends in premiums going down. It's usually the other way around. So workers' compensation is one of the bright points for us in the state. So,
Yeah, thank you very much for
And
that.
also because it works all
I'm sure a large part of it. It actually, we started to see the decline in premiums prior to the pandemic, but with more people staying off the road, more people staying at home, without question.
or
Thank you, Keith.
Yep.
My next topic would be the commercial auto. Any business that has any kind of commercial vehicle, commercial auto is a must. And we suggest that your coverage, if you have a situation where your employees are using their personal vehicles to possibly deliver products or something like that, you really need to have a conversation with your agent because the personal auto policy is not going to cover, generally speaking, livery. So any delivery of goods or products will not be covered. There are companies now that have branched out and they're comfortable with giving these buyback endorsements for this coverage. If that's not an option, then the business really should be the one picking up the coverage for the personal auto that's used for their business needs. Professional liability, that's going to be very industry specific. I'm not going to take a lot of time to go down. What is your business? Are you an accountant? Are you a doctor? So the needs are going to be so varied. And again, your agent is going to be able to tailor that exact policy customized just for you. And then the last really important piece that I want to emphasize would be consider an umbrella that's going to go over. Umbrellas just are excess liability. They're not going to cover any of your assets, but your liability, and it's going to give you that extra layer above all of your primary coverages that you've purchased, just that extra layer. And I think the most important, one of the most important coverages that the umbrella is going to give you with regard to auto is the uninsured motorist, because uninsured motorist is your protection. So you have a policy in place and the person that hits you doesn't. So your uninsured motorist on a primary level is going to be there for you. The same applies to your umbrella policy unless you sign a rejection form that says that you don't want it, which I never recommend any of you do. But that umbrella, that layer is going to be there for you, and God forbid that you ever need it. But if you need it, it's there for you. And the premium for the uninsured motorist is not that much. That is not the heavy lifting part of the premium for umbrella. So it's just a consideration. Always keep it in the back of your mind, and your local agent would be able to help you with limits and so forth like that. And that's really, in a nutshell, just an overview that I had prepared today for the commercial segment.
So why don't I jump? I just want to give you a couple examples. I'm sorry, question?
Are we all in the industry? I was gonna say I thought we were all in the industry, so you're talking to us like clients, so that's all.
You're right.
Just like you might shift.
You represent business. Yeah.
So, we're obviously talking about different kinds of insurance today. At a personal level, I always like to give the example of shopping your insurance. It's something that Luann had mentioned earlier. I have 3 children. My oldest is now 24. I've been a member of Concord Group Insurance since my mom used to work there, so for a very, very long time, probably 30 years. And my son turned 16, wanted to drive, we added him to the policy, or had a quote for the policy, and it was jumping like $2,300. It was something ridiculous. You've probably all been there. At which point I called my agent, which was the Allied Insurance Agency in Bow, and said, hey, listen, what are you going to do? I need you. I took on my own advice and said, shop my coverage. There's not be careful how I say this, there's not necessarily a lot of loyalty rewards for you as a consumer staying with the same company. So Allied Insurance shopped my coverage. They came back to me and said, hey, Keith, you're with the best company right now for you. Stick with Concord Group. And I said, okay, but did you shop me as a new consumer? They said no. 24 hours later, they came back and shopping me as if I was a new consumer to Concord Group. I saved $800 on my premium. So there's a lot of built-in escalators within insurance premiums when you stay with companies. So it really behooves you, whether you're a business owner or even in your own individual insurance fund, shop your coverage, see what's out there. And if you don't have an agent that you're currently working with, we don't recommend any individual specifically at the insurance department, but we do partner and work very closely with the independent insurance agents of New Hampshire. And we can certainly, I have a phone number I can give to you, which I guess this recording is 603-224-3965. If you're shopping for a new agent, you can call them and they can connect you to someone in your local community. Last thing we're going to talk about is an area which most of us have questions about, which is health insurance. The majority of health insurance, I do not recall the percentage, but I want to say the majority of coverage in New Hampshire is provided through group insurance through one's employer. So for the most part, individuals who have employer-sponsored coverage will not have questions. However, we do have questions frequently from individuals who are purchasing their own insurance on the health exchange or the individual market. Open enrollment typically is in the month of November through December, and it can be a pretty daunting process. If individuals have questions about shopping for coverage, let us know. Give us a call. We can help out. But we're also frequently asked by groups like this, hey, small business, small group insurance rates are expensive. What can we do? And unfortunately, there are no easy answers out there right now. Continue to work with your agent. Continue working with your own employees to limit claims, do health incentives to try to keep some of those premiums down. At the insurance department, we're always looking for ways to reduce premiums. There are various subsidies that we've taken advantage of, but we have seen over the years a transition of individuals away from some of those small group plans to the individual market. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have about that, but just know there's no easy solutions out there, but we continue to be vigilant, whether it be looking at association health plans and some of the benefits that those types of coverages would afford, as well as, now it's just going to be primarily association health plans. There's a new vehicle out there called an ICHRA, ICHRA, that we're looking into, which does afford more options at the individual level. So on that, we'll open it up to questions again, and happy to address any concerns you have.
The ICHRA offers more than I thought it was the same as the individual.
It's similar. I guess it's another option. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's something that, frankly, I personally don't know as much about as I probably should. I did some research recently, and it is another vehicle which we see more and more people gravitating to.
It's a really good vehicle for those companies that are really burdened with the premium.
Correct.
But it's a tall task. It's not easy to implement.
That's what I've understood. There's a lot of
But
there's some federal laws involved.
yeah, in that you have the HRA aspect of it from different
Yep.
something or something.
I was looking for the acronym earlier, but I didn't find it quickly. I was going to mention it.
But it is a good app. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
My question is on Medicare Part D credibility. Something new is going into place that lowers the value of to make it credible. So the amount is lower. I think there's like $2,000. So if the RX value is more than $2,000, which is relatively low.
Correct.
The plan's not going to be credible. Medicare Part D credible. I don't know if this is your route.
It's not, but I'm going to try to get to your. If we get to the question, I might have an answer.
Well, I'm wondering if that is if the purpose of this going into place or possibly going into place is to push more senior citizens, let's say, or Medicare eligible people to Medicare A and B or something like plan, so on and so forth. Again, in turn, lowering premiums for the group.
So I think that's a logical conclusion. You're right in the fact that the insurance department does not regulate Medicare or Medicare Advantage or Part D. We do regulate, to some extent, Medicare supplement insurance along the sales side. So it's kind of a weird scenario. Myself and the commissioner were in Washington, D.C. the week before last, actually speaking with our federal delegation about trying to, this is by the way, was going across the nation, all the insurance commissioners flew in, about trying to take over more control over the advertising associated with Medicare Advantage, because it does tend to be misleading and confusing the consumers. And the same agents that are selling that are our own licensed agents in New Hampshire, but don't have direct control over the Medicare questions. We do refer those to CMS. And for those of you who are familiar with Medicaid, those go to the Department of Health and Human Services. Hadn't thought much about the whole Part D scenario that you outlined, but I believe if there's any patterns that we see is not enough people purchase Medicare supplement insurance when they become eligible. And if you don't buy Medicare supplement insurance when you become eligible, there's a penalty provision when you do sign up. And getting more people involved as insureds on the front end is cheaper for everybody.
Right. Okay.
It's a good point. Any other questions? And if not, we're certainly going to be here for a little bit longer. We're happy to answer your questions off to the side, sir.
So what, on the financial product side of things, you mentioned life insurance, but it's not that easy, right? So there's a ton of index universal life sort of predatory salespeople.
Very much so.
Not that these are bad products or whatever, but how do we get consumers to want to be educated and more it's all sort of a retroactive process. Hey, I bought this thing and I don't think it's what I bought a year, 5, 10 years later, or an annuity, or all of these more complex things that get sold on all of the merits. And of course, you get the best interest sort of standards and all these sort of things happening. And yet agents can go out there and just sell this crap and not be held accountable. Now, on the consumer side, they're not necessarily wanting to learn a lot about these products. They just hear the sexy stuff and buy it. But is there anything we can do or is being done?
Well, you've touched upon a lot of issues. First and foremost, any sort of indexed product tends to be one of the more complicated financial products that we regulate. within the insurance division. An index product looks and smells a lot like a variable product, which ties to the stock exchange, security valuations, but it's not. It's actually a fixed interest rate product. So that's why it falls within the jurisdiction of the insurance department as compared to the Securities and Exchange Commission or, the Bureau of Securities Regulation, which is the state counterparts. For decades now, the New Hampshire has been a suitability standard state, which meant anybody selling an annuity product, that the product has to be suitable to the purchaser. And that standard is really, when you think about it, you want to buy an annuity contract, something being in your best interest is very different than something which is, yeah, that's appropriate. So we've recently gone from a suitability standard to a best interest sales standard. That was at the beginning of this year, I believe. What are we doing? Certainly anybody who's selling these products has to pass a licensing exam. The new best interest components are being worked into the new licensing exam, as well as the continuing education credits, which will be required for anybody selling these products, actually began, I believe, as of January 1st. Unfortunately, we at the insurance department don't know what's happening relative to the sale of these products or what's being said at the point of sale until we receive complaints from consumers about that. And typically that doesn't happen for a couple of years after their purchase. When we do identify agents who are misrepresenting the product or not otherwise selling them properly, those are the referrals that go to our enforcement division. I can tell you we had an individual in our office on Friday. The hearing took place about a month or so ago, and we were revoking a license on Friday. So we do take action when we're made aware of individuals who are engaging in inappropriate sales. It's just tough to catch them up front. I'd love to see more aggressive campaigns about buyer beware. Hey, you, the insurance consumer, if you're thinking of buying an annuity or a universal life insurance product, here are some questions to keep in mind. Be proactive, ask your agents. But that's also why we partner with the independent insurance agents, which is we want consumers to connect with professionals who understand the products. I will say that the most common complaint that we receive isn't about the product itself, but about the sales tactics around the product. Individuals who simply don't understand what they're selling or the nuances of whether it be an index product or even a new product design.
Well, they kind of don't have to, even with the best interest standard, because if you're just inserting an additional 10 pages into the application packet, then you're sending a DocuSign. Most people aren't going to be it anyway. So I sent an application on Friday to a client for hope to live with an IRA, and there were probably 8 or 9 pages that had information on it. And then there were another 140 or so of disclosure, ADV and GRS and all that sort of crap. Nobody's there.
Nope. So our former enforcement counsel, I had this discussion once, which is, when you're purchasing an annuity contract or these complicated universal life, variable products, you're signing off lots of documents. It's almost like buying signing for a mortgage. Sign here, sign here. And the sales process looks a lot like sign this, you flip a page, sign here, sign here. And the consumers are really relying upon, in many cases, the verbal representations made at the point of sale leading up to that signature process. What's the solution? Is it another form saying I understand what I've been told? Well, that's already in there. What's the solution? Your guess is as good as mine. There's no, other than what we're doing today, and maybe making people more aware. That's why we have the license agent process. It's those bad actors that get everybody, that give the broader community a bad reputation. But no, if you know anybody who's engaging in those types of that, let me know. We have a pretty good process for identifying what the problems are once we know who the people are. So,
Yeah.
and it's always good practice while we in the state of New Hampshire recognize virtual or electronic signatures. It's always good to get that wet signature and follow up on your documentation. Another issue that we see on the, in particular, life and annuity sales is making sure your consumer signs for policy delivery when you do deliver the life insurance policy. we've unwound a lot of inappropriate transactions because the consumer says, I never received a copy of my policy. And the insurance rules say that if the producer cannot deliver evidence that the consumer received the contract, the date of receipt is what's in the consumer's records of memory. So get that delivery receipt.
I have two notes,
Sure.
very different. First, being a chamber and a nonprofit, directors and officers of insurance comes up a lot. And I see a lot of, well, we're talking about rotaries and civic organizations where they're getting smaller and smaller. And are you seeing anything with regards to people not carrying directors and officers insurance that should because they're not formalizing the way they should?
You know,
Becoming a problem.
we haven't had any complaints about it.
Because I always tell people, if you're going to serve on a board, that's the first question you need to ask,
Sure.
you know, to protect yourself, especially if you're making.
Yeah, we're always telling people it's better to have insurance than not have insurance, as you can imagine. But we're not hearing any complaints about that. But I could see why.
I think as volunteers, sometimes they
That's
still know.
correct.
Education, I guess. And
Yep.
my other question is, how is artificial intelligence impacting your organization or industry?
That's a really good question, which I may not have a great answer for. Like every industry right now, we're wrestling with AI and its involvement. I can tell you, I think it was 2 months ago, the department issued a bulletin. We were the second in the country to issue the bulletin. It's a model bulletin based upon our National Association's guidelines, which basically says, in the state of New Hampshire, we modified it briefly, which is if any licensees, again, think insurance companies, are using AI in underwriting, sales,
Clean.
claims, that there needs to be some sort of human oversight of the algorithms, and that in no way should the artificial intelligence be used in a discriminatory way. Having issued the guidance, what the industry is doing as a whole, at least on the regulatory level, is getting the bulletin out there, putting our licensees on notice that we're aware of it, we're aware of its usage, and that we'll be following up probably after a year to see how it's being used, doing some of those market conduct type exams.
And that's just one side, you know, your insurance. But the other side is, you know, are protecting us as businesses from AI or,
Yep.
you know,
There's definitely a buyer beware component. I mean, you see all the time on the news, or if you read it on Instagram, you know, all these AI engines now, which are using speech patterns, of whether it be political officials or you know,
we're using
actors or whatever
words.
to generate messages which don't belong to those individuals.
Right.
Um,
I feel like it's going to become more and more of a. And
Yeah, I can tell you on a regulatory front, we're very concerned as to what we're going to find. You know, and it's you can only go forward. And it's going to end up being misrepresentation, and we're very much concerned about the potential for discrimination, how it's being used, and how it's unfairly targeting certain subsets of certain demographics.
Well, so on the like cyber policy, would you ultimately recommend like a standalone? Because I know there's limitations that are sort of included. You talk about like cyber guards who went for. So one of the more expensive pieces of that is sort of putting the puzzle back together after it's been, you know, sort of.
Yep.
And that can be a sort of elimination event for a lot of businesses because it's really expensive.
Yeah, I think the monitoring piece most companies have down pretty well right now. It's like you said, it's rebuilding the individuals.
But most of the pieces, the cyber inside of those policies, like homeowner, right, used to be identity protection. Right?
Like
Like,
limited,
oh, well, I have my identity protection into my property policy. Well, yeah, kind of, but not really.
only 15,000 or whatever the limit is. It's right, but the standalones are much broader, more comprehensive. And you know, we review the forms. Obviously, me and my team review the forms, and we see a lot of independent, you know, standalone, like what you're saying, standalone cyber insurance policies, and they're as varied as you can imagine. They are. I mean, it's a really customized. Like they're going to cater to like whatever the niche market is for the companies, whatever they want. So yeah, we do see a lot of standalone cyber coming through, especially now. Yeah.
What do you guys see in the realm of like long-term care stuff? Is that declining in terms of people buying it?
What we see, long-term care insurance is very problematic for individuals in New Hampshire. It's a niche product to begin with, in that those who have wealth don't need it, and those who need it, you need to have a certain amount of income to afford it, because it's not the cheapest product. There have been various laws and rules written over the last decade to help regulate long-term care insurance. One of those that the state passed was limiting the amount of premium increase that can be experienced by seniors. We were ultimately sued. It was found unconstitutional. That particular consumer protection was unwound. And now there's very little that we can do to keep premiums down on the product. What has happened within the product is it's a guaranteed issue product. So once you purchase long-term care insurance, which is again to protect you from the costs associated with long-term care, and think seniors who need to be at a nursing home, very expensive. The premiums have been increasing. Were increasing. Like the highest increase we saw was 800%. So at the time when consumers need the product the most, because of some erroneous underwriting assumptions, when it comes time to refile rates, these rates are going through the roof, and we can't control them. I think that's been one of the biggest drivers in the limited sales of the product. Many of the companies that were mainstream long-term care sellers have withdrawn from the market and are now just serving existing clients. I don't think it's a bad product. I just think it's a product of, buyer beware. Make sure it's a good product for the right client. And the right client, in my mind, is typically going to be a double income, no income couple that doesn't have children, that's kind of set for retirement, heading into a time period where they want some certainty around cost control.
How many group carriers are there in the state of first Walter?
It's a tough question to answer, because most of your large life insurance companies, by nature of the license, they're licensed to sell it, but doesn't mean they're actively selling it or offering the product. The biggest in New England for a while was John Hancock MetLife. Genworth had a large book of business, but Genworth and Hancock no longer write in New Hampshire. Yeah, there you go, the name change. Bright House.
Their rates were style. Right?
So if you were to go to our website, I think on our homepage, we're actually transitioning to a new website here pretty soon. There's a link to a long-term care frequently asked questions document. At the back of that document there are 2 pages. The second to last page contains directions for accessing the rate filings of the insurance carriers and their justification for the rate increases. And the last page is a chart by carrier name of what those rate increases that have been approved. And like I said, I think the biggest was 800%. There are still some limitations as to if a company wants to raise rates 100%, they can do no more than 20% in one calendar year. So, but it's a great resource, especially if you're, agent selling the product. If nothing else, you can see what's going on with your, competitor products.
Very tough parts. So a lot of the life companies now, you can do the rider and you can
Just to tack it to it, yeah. So we see fewer problems with rider policies than we do with actual long-term care contracts.
underwriting time.
Very much so, because you're using, in many cases, cash value, the same assets as reserves for the long-term care components.
Sorry.
It's very simple. That was a good that's like Stump the Chump Puppy. That was a good question. Not ones we get too often.
My disorder back in court, because I don't like sell some products. Are you seeing businesses cutting costs in products that they're actually purchasing, or are you seeing the level with, just my experience with dealing with, in the past, we always wanted to create that big package, but now
sometimes that's cost, or you're seeing smaller businesses can less of the added with 1,000 employees. Trying to think, yeah.
Long-term care is definitely off the most very I do see that companies dropping their disability.
You said dropping, okay.
I guess that's where I was
Disability, though you have the
for the officers, but not the hourly employees. Do you see that?
I think class O, yeah, so are definitely class O. As far as the MetLife's New Hampshire, it's not FMLA, like
Yes.
again that
PFML, Planned Family Medical Leave, yeah,
also.
Yeah.
very much so.
I do, and I think that's kind of where companies are leaning, where towards the disability.
Understand more. Yeah.
Well, replacing the disability product with
Yeah. So the premiums are pretty affordable.
yes.
And it's something that we, as a state insurance department, look to my outreach team. I think we did a piece on that not too long ago. We really are looking to industry to help push that product more because we do believe it's a good product. It's priced right. And what we've found is that most, just by nature of when this product was approved for sale last year, it came in after most open enrollment periods for employee benefits, that it's a great product for employees that are looking for that income replacement component.
Upward.
Yeah, and affordability. Well, no, I think we're wrapped up here. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, we'll be around. So just pull us aside.